So excited to talk to all these folks. Before I dive in, I need to thank a few more in-kind partners: Farmer's Fridge, Oatly, The Good Smart, and Climate Candy. So let's dig in. Ken, I get to start with you, my friend. It's been a long time since I've had you on stage.
You have to start with me. I'm so nervous.
You're going to be great. So, and this is before we get into school meals. I'm hoping you can give us a snapshot of what's happening on the ground with smallholder farmers, especially right now.
Yeah, so, at Lotus Foods, we like to say rice is life. And so just to provide a little context, more people derive their livelihood from rice than anything else done on the planet Earth. And so it's a really important crop. But there are kind of some problems with growing rice. And so most people don't know that continuously flooded fields are the number 3 man-made reason for methane emissions, which is a 20 times more deleterious gas than even CO2. And so the system of rice intensification is what we advocate that farmers do in terms of changing how they grow rice. And so we're really trying to catalyze how rice is grown by being a market connector, providing markets for folks. And so when you have those flooded fields, there's the methane emissions. But when you deploy a method called SRI, the system of rice intensification, they're using, it's a kind of a less is more paradigm.
Right.
So less water, less seeds, no agrochemicals, and no reliance on seeds, special seeds from multinational companies. And oh, by the way, you have to use these chemicals with them. And so farming is so difficult. And with climate change, you're talking about people who work outside, who have to grow food in conditions that are not conducive to growing food.
Right.
Raining at the wrong time, it's too hot, winds are too strong, knocking down crops. So the thing with, as I was thinking about this panel, like, how do we talk about feeding kids in school? Well, with SRI, farmers have less work because of they're not stressing out the plant in flooded waters.
Right.
And they're actually getting double and triple their yield. So livelihood-wise, farmers are benefiting from this new way of growing rice, and it's not a technology, it's a methodology.
Right.
And so this opens the pathway for kids to actually go to school because they don't have to be in the field. And so I was impressed by one of the prior panelists that was saying that kids go to school, when they get fed, they go to school more.
Right.
But if the conditions on the farm are such that they can't go to school, then so it's this conundrum, right?
Right. Vicious circle, kind of, yeah.
And so that's, for me, we don't directly get involved with feeding kids in school, but I think this kind of goes to people struggle with what is regenerative, And so I think if you look at all the nodal points in our ecosystem, whether it's the individual or the community we live in or the planet at large, we have to build everything so that we build the whole system.
Right.
So that everything can thrive. It's not just about feeding kids, which is a great thing to do, but it's like the conditions that allow the communities to thrive. And I think that's, as a company, why we feel so strongly about changing how rice is grown. And we're a small company, but we feel like we can have the power to catalyze this kind of change.
Right. Thank you for setting the stage. It's really helpful. Emily, if I can turn to you, schools can offer a really stable market for farmers. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what that actually means, what it allows, what other things it allows to happen when they have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It's just such a pleasure to be here and such a pleasure to learn from everybody speaking now and in prior sessions. So I'm Emily Coppel from the Rockefeller Foundation, and I'll premise by saying that earlier this year in March, we committed $100 million over the next 5 years to support regenerative school meals. And this is a big bet that has been years in the making, but in part because we see school meals as this kind of unique unlock for multiple benefits. It can support local economic development. It can incentivize for regenerative and agroecological production, and it, of course, improves nutrition, improves attendance, and learning outcomes for children. Right. And so we've kind of honed in on a few different areas within this big bet, including kind of the power of procurement.
Right.
And actually, this is very much a country-led solution, in part with support from partners like the World Food Program and many others that are working hand in hand with countries. I was just in Fortaleza, Brazil last week for the School Meals Coalition. 80 countries were represented, 40 ministries, and many of them are announcing kind of their commitments to homegrown school meal programs, and also looking at levers through national procurement policy to incentivize for more climate resilient agriculture practices. And so from the foundation's perspective, we're kind of looking at this from three different angles. One is meals, supporting partners to improve the nutritional quality of meals, helping governments develop menus that not only source locally, but are looking at local crops like sorghum and millet that are kind of naturally climate resilient, and thinking about how you can incorporate those into school meal menus. It's also about markets and aligning investors on the kind of private sector side, and ensuring that they're supporting regenerative transitions, while also looking at national level policies like those in Brazil that incentivize for 30% of school meal production to be sourced from local farmers. And actually they announced that they're going to up that to 45%.
Amazing.
And the benefits to farmers we're seeing are really significant. I think in Brazil there was a recent study that said that farmers were able to increase their income by 106% just because of feeding into the school meals markets.
106%.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So it's a significant driver, and these are definitely country-led solutions. The other thing I'll say that I think hasn't been talked about as much, but I definitely heard in Brazil kind of in spades, is that the school is also a natural platform for teaching about some of these agricultural techniques. And we've seen that in a number of countries as well. And like in Guatemala, in Ghana, in Rwanda, where, you know, if there are kitchen gardens, for example, within kind of the school, they can use that as a plot to teach young people about agroecological or regenerative practices as well. So that's kind of the whole of our strategy, and I think we're very interested in continuing to work with partners to unlock some of these policy levers to support kids and to support farmers and to improve the planet.
It's so exciting because if you're focusing on schools, if you're focusing on school meals, you're really focusing on the community as a whole and really building the infrastructure intellectually and, you know, physical that's needed to continue regenerative agriculture.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, there's often some skepticism because it is at the community level, but we're also talking about a significant amount of food and income. 70% of government food procurement in many countries is going towards school meals, and globally it's a market of $48 billion. I wrote down the stats because I wanted to make sure I got it correct. But it's a huge driver, and that can go towards supporting local farmers and improving regenerative practices.
So many wins.
Yes, absolutely.
Robert, if I can turn to you, the faith-based community plays such an important role around the world in anti-hunger work, and I'm wondering if you can talk about how school meals fit into the work that you're doing.
Well, I think all of us can relate to hunger. We've all skipped a meal or two and we know what that feels like. But that's not what we're actually talking about here, is we're talking about hunger. We're talking about hunger that stands in the way from people providing a living for their family, from staying healthy, from being productive contributors in society and to serving others. When we look at youth especially, and especially younger children, we're talking about their physical and mental development during a period of their life that will never be made up. And that's why it becomes so critical. We're focused really heavily on the well-being of children and helping them get a good start to life in such a way that they're going to be able to meet their potential. And so you've got to focus in, number one, on the health of mom, and then maternal and newborn care and nutrition. But right after that becomes education. And we know the statistics, we know the results. When you combine those two, you see some tremendous outcomes. Throughout church meeting houses throughout Africa, we're sponsoring programs, after-school study programs, where students can come to the school, they can get a meal, and then it's a study hall. And we've got tutors and mentors there celebrating the importance of education. So you bring these two things together, and you're sending a message to the family that education is so important that we want to host you at church after school and make sure you're getting the support you need. Let's combine that with nutrition and make sure you can really thrive in the educational setting.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit more about your work with WFP and how you've been able to sort of find those synergies and opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. as I've been thinking about this, I have a memory that goes back several years to a small school, rural village in Bolivia, in the Altiplano, that I went to. And they showed off the humble little classroom, but then they've got a small garden and a greenhouse. And what's really exciting is that the children and the parents are learning how to use this and how to basically home garden and farm in what is a really harsh environment.
Yeah.
And then the parents come in at lunchtime, and the kids are harvesting, and the parents are preparing this lunch, and they're learning nutritious facts and recipes and all of this. Fast forward several years later, and I've had the opportunity to visit the field with World Food Program, and to see that in a much more sophisticated and mature strategy.
Right.
My colleague was on the trip with Barron earlier this year to Liberia, and he talked about that teacher's statement about without meals, the children don't come to school.
Right.
What was interesting, my colleague, as she documented her visit, she's got pictures of the rice farmers out there. And you can see the confidence in their faces
Right.
as they're planting and working together, that they know they've got someone that's going to buy this rice.
Right.
And then you move on to the cooperative, where they've got this place, they've got the equipment, and they've improved their standard of production and what's required. The quality of what they're producing is better. And then you go to the school, and there are parents in the kitchen preparing the meal, and then their kids come through. You just see this chain of impact that takes
Right,
place, and
right.
it just lifts the entire community.
It's really cool, because you have, you know, this experimentation that happens, you have the implementation, you have the market access, you have the education, and then you have that feeding. That is what this is all about. That's really, that chain is very complex, but also very simple at the same time. Thank you so much. Doug, I'd love to turn to you and talk a little bit, if you can, about why school meals are so important to Lion Clubs International.
Thank you, and it's good to be here and to see so many people who have an interest in this topic. Lions Clubs International, the world's largest service organization in more than 200 countries around the world. Hunger is one of our global causes. And my personal story is when I delivered a meal to a needy family at Thanksgiving time, right in Brooklyn, New York, where I live. I walked away feeling so good about the experience, and all I had done was given a meal to a needy family. And to think that there are so many people right here in our own communities who suffer from food insecurity. And talking about children in schools, you mentioned children don't go to school, but many of them go to school because they get a meal. And we know that children learn better when they have a full stomach. And we've been able to partner with the World Food Organization in 4 countries to provide over almost 900,000 meals
Wow.
in 7,000 schools in Nepal, Ecuador, Sri Lanka, and Uganda. And I visited some of these places, and I've seen the smiles on the faces of these children. I'm getting like you.
Sorry, I started the flood.
When you provide them with a meal, and not only do we feed them there, but they leave with food to take home.
Right.
And I often think about the story where you say you give a person a fish, they eat. If you teach them how to fish, they learn to feed themselves for more than one day. And that's what we do as Lions. Food pantries, we provide through our foundation, LCIF, Lions Clubs International Foundation, grants, hunger grants. And it encompasses a lot of different things. You may have a food pantry, but they don't have a place to store the food, especially frozen foods, And we're able to provide the infrastructure, the refrigeration, the feeding tables and things like that, the prep tables to prepare the foods. We do this all over. I've been to Kenya, and I've seen. We fed thousands of children. I mean, it just touches your heart, and that was my into becoming a part of Lions. And I've been with Lions 40 years now.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And feeding hunger is my thing.
That's
Sorry,
great.
but-
Thank you, Douglas. You're gonna make me cry. I'm wondering, Douglas and Robert, you know, partnering with organizations like WFP, you wouldn't be able to do this work, the things you feel so strongly about, if you didn't have an organization like WFP. You couldn't reach these folks. Can you talk about, you know, the connection you've made with WFP and why it's so important? Douglas, you want to go first?
Sure, that's the collaboration. And that's something that we're finding that you can do so much more when we collaborate with others. You know, we can provide, say, the finances. In some cases, they have the boots on the ground. They have the expertise in how to do these different things. And that's how you're able to advance these projects and move forward. And we've been talking about this forever, hunger. And I guess we will continue to talk about it. But we can see that we are making inroads. And that's what we want to see, that we are able to give people a better life. And nutrition is so critical.
Thank you, Douglas. Robert?
For me, it's kind of a heart and mind kind of conversion, if you will. And I've talked about some experiences that have blessed to be out there and see the empowerment that takes place, the pride, the enthusiasm in communities where these things are happening. Right. To see how well World Food Program delivers these services, how well they implement. They're really good out there. But then about 3 weeks ago, we had a briefing online with them where they brought in their school meals team. And what was really neat there is they laid the foundation of some of the statistics, the research that they've done that shows if we do this and the other, here are the impacts on children, on the local market, on families, on livelihoods. Right. And so for me, there's that combination. I can go out there and see it and feel the passion and the love, but then they've got the research that really backs it up and shows that it's concrete.
Yeah, it's not just food that's being delivered, it's pride and enthusiasm and innovation, as you said. Ken, let me come back to you. So what happens to farmers when they're using the practices that you talked about earlier, that Emily talked about? What do regenerative practices actually mean for families, for individuals?
That's really interesting. Perhaps you remember when Prime Minister Modi in India came across with a bunch of changes to legislation, and farmers across India took to the streets in protest. This is during COVID. So they're gathered together in a very dangerous situation, but they're protesting the policy changes. And, I called our supplier. I said, are our farmers out on the streets? They said, no, because they'd been providing all the technical assistance and everything that they needed, and they were actually prospering because of the new way of growing rice, not in flooded fields, saving water, increasing yield without using, special seeds. And so I was thinking about this other component of education. We're all talking about the benefits of, and certainly there are many. But in our experience, when kids go to school, it's a good avenue to learn about these new farming techniques. And they take those home because, let's face it, if you introduce, 5,000 years of rice farming, and then you introduce this new way to do it, and people are naturally resistant. But I think about almost like what happened in this country, where kids went to school and they learned about recycling, or where does their waste go, and they go home and they shame their parents into recycling. Yeah. And so I think that's what's happening on the ground. They're learning about new agroecological ways to grow rice, and they're sharing it at home, or when they inherit the farm, they deploy these methods. So, education is so much an empowering thing, and it's really uplifting, in terms of 30 years of Lotus Foods business. We've been able to try and pioneer this movement away from, rice growing methods that deplete the soil. After all, when you look at the reports and they say there's like 30 or 40 harvests left, I don't know what that number is, but it's scary, right? And then when you look at the extreme weather, and how do you grow anything outside? I mean, hydroponics are not going to save us, right? It's a good thing, but soil really matters, and sequestering carbon matters, and getting control of all these out of control forces. So, yeah, I think it's slowly happening. It's probably in about 60 countries now, and about 25, 30 million farmers, but still have a long way to go.
And you've provided so much opportunity for farmers to have dignity and continue to innovate. So thank you to Lotus Foods for all of that.
Yeah, and then, it's interesting because we started as a rice company, but now that we've got into added value products with the rice noodles, and now we have to find, and we're finding more farmers that are agreeable, that want to try a new way of growing rice. And so it's been a very rewarding type of work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Emily, Ken has been talking about resilience and really what that means in so many different ways, whether it's economic resilience or resilience to the climate crisis. How do school meal programs provide resilience for communities and for nations as a whole?
Such a good question. And, I think that when school meals are used as this demand lever, because we can focus on the supply side piece, but really there needs to be a demand, a market for agroecologically grown food. And I think when you have that in place, coupled with additional support, you can really start to build that resilience. And I think that it's not just kind of farmers, supporting farmers on that transition, but also, connecting children who are learning about these practices in school or elsewhere, and seeing the opportunities that they have for the kind of intergenerational learning that you're talking about. And I think, there's the resilience of the soil through better practices, resilience of the farmers with improved income and, less, not as, they don't have as much kind of fertilizers and that sort of thing that are affecting health, which is something we've seen a lot in Kenya. And then also you're building resilience of children because they know that, they've got a school meal that they can come to every day. Not to come back to Brazil, but I visited a school there, and I was so taken with the ownership that the children had over the program. They presented to us, and they kind of stood up in front of us. These were middle schoolers who were practicing their English, so nervous in front of an international crowd. And they were educating us, like, this is where our school meals come from. These are where our school meals come from. These are the foods that we eat. This is why they're nutritionally healthy for us. This is how it's supporting our community. They're, culturally relevant, and they're the foods that we eat in Sarah State, where the conference was. And the pride in that, I think it's hard to articulate because you could just see it come out of all of the youth that were there, that all of these people were coming to learn about their school meal program, right, and the cooks in their kitchen, and all of the people who work so hard to feed, I think it was like 3 football stadiums worth of children every day. So it was a significant operation, and when you see it working well, it really gives you hope for what's possible everywhere.
Right, and the pride and the dignity and the innovation can't be measured in the same way that we can measure, how much carbon we're extracting from the atmosphere, or, this soil nutrients. This is a different way of measuring things, and it's so important for communities to be part of that and feel like they have that ownership.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in a lot of the different, to repeat some of the things that this fabulous panel has shared, I think the community ownership of farmers often are kind of sourcing to schools where their kids are going. It really fosters this kind of collaboration and a close-knit community, and we see this in the U.S. as well. So, yeah.
That's why Rockefeller chose it as a big bet, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we've actually learned quite a bit from our work in the U.S. And also internationally over the last couple of years. And so we're very excited, but also really believe in supporting country-led solutions, bringing farmers, indigenous peoples, youth, all of the different stakeholders who have who are involved in this agenda to the table to inform some of these solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great points to end on. Please give this panel a round of applause. Thank you all. Amazing.